How does a 17-year-old become the most talked about footballer on the planet? At an age when most players are still fighting for academy minutes, major international has already rewritten domestic titles and over 100 appearances at the highest level, achievements that took legends years to reach, arrived for him before adulthood. When Lionel Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo were 17, they were still learning how to survive professional football. Yamal, meanwhile, is shaping it. So how did this happen? How does a quiet teenager with a slight frame become a global phenomenon? To understand it, you have to go back to a moment that almost feels scripted by destiny. In 2007, during a UNICEF charity shoot, Lionel Messi was photographed holding and bathing a baby. A child far too young to understand the moment, yet unknowingly standing at the very beginning of a story that would one day circle back to Barcelona's future. That baby was Lamine Yamal. At the time, it meant nothing. Years later, it would feel symbolic. But if this story sounds magical, the reality of Yamal's childhood was anything but. His family settled in Mataró, a modest coastal town near Barcelona. Life there wasn't glamorous. His parents were young, hardworking, and struggling. His father, originally from Morocco, worked construction jobs while holding on to dreams of football that never fully materialized. His mother, from Equatorial Guinea, balanced long hours as a waitress to keep the family afloat. Money was tight, stability was rare. But one thing was constant: a football at Lamine's feet. From the earliest age, the ball seemed to obey him. On concrete streets and sandy beaches, Yamal played with a freedom that couldn't be taught. It wasn't rehearsed skill, it was instinct. Where other children chased the ball, he guided it. Where others rushed, he paused. That natural relationship with football quickly became impossible to ignore. At just 4 years old, he joined a small local club, CF La Torreta, and immediately stood apart. Not because he was louder or stronger, but because he was calmer. While other kids hesitated after mistakes, Yamal played on, unfazed. Pressure didn't bother him. Attention didn't change him. Goals followed naturally. By the time most children were discovering organized football, Yamal was already attracting interest from elite academies across Spain. Clubs like Real Madrid, Espanyol, and Valencia all noticed the same thing. This wasn't just talent, it was understanding. Ironically, his father favored Real Madrid, but Lamine had his own vision. He grew up watching Ronaldinho's joy, Neymar's flair, and Messi's control. Barcelona wasn't just a club to him, it was an idea, a style, a dream. So when the opportunity came, there was only one choice. At La Masia, Barcelona's legendary academy, Yamal didn't just progress, he accelerated. While most players eventually blend in as competition increases, he separated himself even further. Coaches noticed that time didn't balance him out. It magnified him. He played up age groups. He dominated matches meant for older players. And still, he stayed grounded. Despite training at one of the world's most famous academies, Yamal continued playing street football with friends back home, never announcing his success, never changing his habits. To him, football was still joy before pressure. Then came the moment secrecy ended. Scoring 56 goals in 30 games while competing above his age level forced Barcelona to act. The club invited him to live at La Masia's residence, not just to develop his football, but to protect the player behind it. His sleep, nutrition, workload, and mindset were now carefully managed. The project was no longer hidden. The world hadn't realized it yet, but football was quietly preparing its next chapter, and this was only the beginning. By the time Lamine Yamal reached his early teens, Barcelona already knew they were protecting something rare. But it wasn't until he stepped onto a bigger stage that the rest of Europe finally caught on. At the La Liga Promises Santander tournament, a youth competition packed with elite clubs from across Spain and Europe, Barcelona faced the likes of Liverpool, Juventus, Borussia Dortmund, and their eternal rivals, Real Madrid. What followed wasn't competition, it was domination. Yamal didn't just perform well, he tore the tournament apart. 7 goals, endless take-ons. Defenders left frozen, and in one unforgettable match, Barcelona demolished Real Madrid 6-1, with Yamal at the center of everything. It wouldn't be the last time he tormented El Clásico opposition, but it was the first moment people realized this kid didn't fear anyone. When the tournament ended, Yamal walked away with Player of the Tournament honors as Barcelona lifted the trophy. From that moment on, ignoring him was no longer possible. Spain's national team coaches took notice. Despite still being years younger than most players in the system, Yamal was invited to train with the under-15 and under-16 national squads. On paper, it didn't make sense. He was smaller, lighter, less developed physically. On the pitch, none of that mattered. Against older, stronger defenders wearing the national badge, Yamal played the same way he always had. Calm, expressive, fearless. He dribbled, created, and dictated play as if age simply wasn't a factor. Then came 2023. At just 15 years old, Yamal was selected for the Under-17 European Championship, competing against players up to 2 years older than him. To most teenagers, that jump would be overwhelming. To Yamal, it felt familiar. He scored 4 goals in the tournament and played with the same ease he once showed on the concrete streets of Mataró. Scouts, executives, and football's most powerful figures were watching closely now. Even Florentino Perez took interest. Knowing Yamal's father was a lifelong Real Madrid supporter, Perez invited him into the VIP areas of the Bernabeu, hoping to plant doubt, hoping to shift loyalties. For many families, the offer alone would have been enough. For Lamine, it changed nothing. Barcelona was home. And during the 2022-23 season, his performances made that loyalty impossible to question. His level had risen so quickly that even the first-team coaching staff found it hard to justify keeping him away. In youth matches, Yamal embarrassed defenders with roulettes, feints, and elastic dribbles. But what truly separated him was end product. He didn't just entertain, he decided games. Eventually, resistance faded. The first-team door opened. In September 2022, still only 15, Yamal was invited to train with Barcelona's senior squad. What was meant to be a learning experience quickly turned into something else entirely. In training sessions, he danced past Jordi Alba, slipped by Gerard Piqué, and left Sergio Busquets chasing shadows. Inside the club, quiet conversations began. Comparisons nobody wanted to say out loud started forming. Still, Barcelona remained cautious. He was a boy. The spotlight could wait. On April 23, 2023, Yamal was named on the bench for a La Liga clash against Atletico Madrid. He didn't step onto the pitch that night, as Barcelona secured a narrow victory. But the message was clear. His time was close. 1 week later against Real Betis, with Barcelona comfortably leading 4-0 late in the game, the moment arrived. At 15 years and 290 days old, Lamine Yamal replaced Gavi and became the youngest player in Barcelona's La Liga history. In just a few minutes, he offered a glimpse of what was coming. Sharp movement, clever decisions, and a near-perfect assist that almost found Ousmane Dembélé. The scoreline didn't change, but everything else did. Under normal circumstances, Barcelona would have eased him in slowly. But these weren't normal circumstances. The club was deep in financial crisis. They couldn't afford reinforcements. Dembélé, their first-choice winger, was sold. Ansu Fati, once expected to carry the torch, struggled with injuries and form. There was no hiding anymore. Preseason arrived, and Yamal didn't just impress, he forced the issue. Against seasoned professionals, he looked ready. Not promising, ready. So Barcelona made a decision few clubs would dare to make. They fast-tracked him. Amazingly, Lamine Yamal began the 2023-24 season as one of Barcelona's first-choice wingers. 3 matches into the campaign, he delivered his statement performance. Against Villarreal, Yamal claimed man of the match, provided an assist, and played like someone who belonged at the highest level. Any remaining doubts disappeared. Game after game he featured. Pressure increased. Expectations grew. He didn't flinch. By November, Yamal became the youngest player ever to appear in an El Clásico. A month later, the football world officially acknowledged what had been obvious for some time. At just 16 years old, Lamine Yamal was nominated for the Golden Boy Award, not as a future prospect, but as a present force. And somehow this story was still only warming up. By the turn of the year, Lamine Yamal's talent was no longer in question. His flair, imagination, and confidence had been evident in almost every appearance. Yet statistically, there was still one argument skeptics clung to: goals. That argument didn't last long. As 2024 began, something shifted. The teenager didn't just entertain anymore. He decided matches. Within weeks, Yamal became the youngest goal scorer in both the Copa del Rey and the Spanish Super Cup, achieving the feats in consecutive months and stamping his authority on competitions usually dominated by seasoned veterans. The right wing was no longer a position he occupied. It became his territory. By February, Barcelona's team sheet told a clear story. At just 16 years old, Yamal was no longer eased into matches. He was one of the first names written down. Over a 2-game stretch in La Liga, he delivered 4 direct goal contributions, and suddenly the narrative changed. The global media stopped asking how good he could become. They started asking how good he already was. In April 2024, the hype reached a new peak when Yamal became the youngest player in La Liga history to register 10 goal involvements in a single season. Records began falling almost weekly. Every appearance felt like another milestone, another confirmation that this wasn't a temporary spark. But if there were still doubters, if anyone believed this was just a hot streak, the summer of 2024 was about to erase all uncertainty forever. Because football was about to witness something unprecedented. When Spain announced their squad for the European Championships, Lamine Yamal's name was there. At just 16, he became one of the youngest players ever selected for a major international tournament. This wasn't a Spain side stacked with global superstars like in the golden era. There were no Xavi or Iniesta figures dominating headlines. Compared to the star-studded squads of France, England, Portugal, and host Germany, Spain entered the tournament quietly, almost unnoticed, which made what followed even more remarkable. Yamal started all 3 group stage matches, helping Spain glide through a difficult group with 3 wins and 0 goals conceded. Calm, composed, fearless, he played like someone who belonged. But the knockout rounds were where the teenager truly came alive. In victories over Georgia and Germany, Yamal registered 2 assists, growing with every touch, every dribble, every moment under pressure. By the time Spain reached the semifinals, confidence had turned into belief. Then came France, a nation packed with world-class talent, a team led by Kylian Mbappé, already a World Cup winner and global icon. On paper, Spain were underdogs, and when France scored early through Kolo Muani, it looked like reality might finally catch up with the young Spanish side. But Yamal had other plans. From distance, nearly 30 yards from goal, the ball found its way to him. Time seemed to slow. For a split second, it felt as if his entire journey, from the streets of Mataró to Europe's grandest stage, passed through his mind. He shifted his body, created space where none existed, and then, with perfect balance and precision, curled an unstoppable strike into the far corner. A goal that stunned the stadium, a goal that rewrote history. Inspired by Yamal's brilliance, Spain surged forward, completing a 2-1 comeback victory and reaching their first major final since 2012. The teenager finished the tournament with 4 assists and a goal, but numbers alone couldn't capture his impact. At 16, he had carried a nation. In the final, Spain faced England, led by another footballing phenomenon, Jude Bellingham. Once again, the spotlight was filled with names the media said Yamal should fear. Once again, he ignored the noise. Spain controlled the match. Yamal lit up the right flank, constantly probing, constantly threatening. His vision and composure led to the opening goal as he provided a perfectly weighted assist, setting the tone for a historic night. Spain triumphed 2-1. The tournament had been expected to crown superstars. Mbappé, Bellingham, Kane, Musiala. They all arrived in Germany with the goal of defining their legacy. But when the dust settled, it was the skinny 16-year-old from Mataró who had stolen the show. And remarkably, the momentum didn't stop there. As the following season began, Real Madrid assembled what many believed was an unstoppable super team. Mbappé joined forces with Bellingham, Vinicius Jr., and Rodrigo, a lineup designed to dominate Spain and Europe for years. Yet even they weren't prepared. By late October of the 2024-25 season, when Barcelona faced Real Madrid for the first time, Yamal had already recorded 10 La Liga goal involvements in just 11 matches. Not as a future star, not as a wonderkid, but as one of the most decisive players in world football. And somehow, this story was still far from finished. Despite Barcelona holding a 6-point lead at the top of La Liga, confidence inside the Spanish capital remained sky high. Real Madrid, dripping in star power, welcomed Hansi Flick's youthful Barcelona side to the Bernabeu with an air of superiority that bordered on arrogance. From Madrid's perspective, this Barcelona team was a patchwork project: academy graduates, bargain signings, and teenagers still learning the game. In contrast, they saw themselves as football royalty, armed with Galacticos and backed by the intimidating walls of their legendary stadium. What followed was a brutal reality check. Barcelona didn't just compete, they dominated. In one of the most shocking Clásico performances in modern history, the Catalans dismantled Madrid 4-0 on their own turf. And at the heart of it all stood Lamine Yamal. That night, the teenager scored his first senior goal against Real Madrid, announcing himself not just as a rising star, but as a player who thrived on football's biggest stages. Yet, remarkably, that was only the beginning. The humiliation continued. Barcelona went on to defeat Madrid 5-2 in the Supercopa final, and later 3-2 in the Copa del Rey final, completing a domestic treble of Clásico dominance. Across those decisive matches, Yamal registered 3 more goal involvements, tormenting Madrid's defenders with a composure far beyond his years. By this point, perceptions had shifted permanently. Lamine Yamal was no longer labeled the best young player in the world. He was being discussed in far more serious company. As the season progressed, the conversation evolved into something unthinkable just months earlier. Ballon d'Or contender, and then came Europe. In the Champions League semi-final against Inter Milan, Yamal delivered a performance that felt symbolic, a passing of the torch. For many watching, it was the clearest glimpse yet of a footballer destined to inherit the legacy once carried by Lionel Messi. During the first leg, with Barcelona trailing 2-0, Yamal produced a moment of genius that left the footballing world stunned. A piece of individual brilliance so audacious, so effortless, that some argued it eclipsed even his unforgettable strike against France at the Euros. Barcelona would ultimately fall short. Defensive inexperience and youthful naivety cost them dearly, as Inter edged through in a dramatic 7-6 aggregate defeat. It was heartbreaking, raw and painful, but it did nothing to diminish Yamal's brilliance. Even in defeat, his season was extraordinary. He had already secured the Golden Boy Award, recognizing him as the best young footballer on the planet. But individual accolades weren't enough. His focus was firmly fixed on silverware, and one prize above all others: La Liga. As May arrived, the title race reached its defining moment. With just a handful of matches remaining, Barcelona and Real Madrid met once more in an El Clásico that would decide the destiny of the championship. This time, the confidence inside Madrid's camp had vanished. After being outplayed, outscored, and outclassed by Yamal across 3 previous meetings, fear had replaced arrogance, and they had every reason to worry. In a pulsating encounter, Yamal once again rose to the occasion. He scored, dictated the tempo, and dragged Barcelona toward a dramatic 4-3 victory, a result that all but sealed the 2024-25 La Liga title. At just 17 years old, Lamine Yamal had proven something extraordinary. He wasn't just a prodigy, he wasn't just a future star. He was already one of the best players in world football. Now, unbelievably, the teenager finds himself legitimately in the Ballon d'Or conversation. Not as a marketing gimmick, not as a hopeful outsider, but as a player with a genuine chance. And that raises the final question. What comes next? Because if this is what Lamine Yamal can achieve at 17, then football may only be witnessing the very beginning of something historic. One thing is certain, he's not done yet.